Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann, and it's been like 2 weeks since I tried to talk about a book, so let's see if I can still do it. It's been sort of a marathon 2 weeks where I've been barely reading and barely watching BookTube. We had a week of unexpected travel to go visit an ill elderly family member, and then I had some planned travel for work, and in between those things, there were like a few days of just like running around like crazy and getting things set up and able to continue in my absence and stuff. So it's been crazy, but hopefully I am sort of back. Summer is just always wild for me, so we'll just see how it goes. But anyway, one book that I read in the past 2 weeks when things have been nuts was Witches Steeped in Gold by Ciannon Smart, and I did look up, and I think her name is pronounced Shannon. And I buddy read this with Katie over at Katie Reads and Rants. We chatted about it on Voxer and ended up with pretty similar opinions about it. So this is classified, so I'm getting my notes so I don't forget anything that I wanted to talk about. This is classified as YA. As I was reading it, I was like, I don't really, like, this doesn't super feel like YA. I mean, the main characters are teenagers. It focuses on two young women who are both 17, about to turn 18 at the start of the book. But the stuff that's going on, I mean, they're embedded in high level politics and stuff. So yeah, and I could as I was reading it see how especially the style um, was a little bit YA, but the book itself really didn't strike me like that. So anyway, just to throw that out there, this is fantasy. So the author grew up in England, but she has Jamaican heritage, and so she's written this book set in a world that is drawing very, very heavily on Jamaica, even including some similarities in the name of the country, which is, and I don't know how to pronounce this. It's like Jamaica or something, Xaymaca. And some of the geographic descriptions of the country are very much like Jamaica. So it is an island nation, and there's a group of islands around. And this island, Jamaica, has sort of a wealth of gold. You can see these two characters wearing some of the gold. And the magic system in this world, obviously witches, draws heavily on gold. They call it a conduit metal, and it can help be a conduit for magic. So the presence of gold is I think what's driven the wealth and power of Jamaica. And then these two women represent two sort of competing ruling families of Jamaica. So the silver-haired ones are the Alumbrar, and the dark-haired ones are the Obeah. And for much of the history of this place, so for thousands of years, the Obeah have usually been the ones who are in charge. They're a much more warrior-like caste, I forget what they're called, order. They're called orders. So they're a much more warrior-like order. They tend to be sort of a bit more in touch with physical things. So they have sex a lot more, and they use music sort of as like for pleasure, for dancing and things like that. The Alumbrar are sort of more withdrawn almost, and their magic tends in a different direction, more towards like healing and things like that. They only use music as part of specific ceremonies to honor or communicate with the ancestors. So there's some differences there. And it turns out the Alumbrar had been feeling oppressed and not well represented. And so about 10 years before the start of this book, the Alumbrar staged a successful overthrow, and they murdered the ruling family of the Obeah. They set up a whole system of a lot of Obeah are in prison at the start of this book. They have a conscription system where the magical youth of the Obeah order are essentially conscripted into military service for a set period of time, and their magic is used in service of the Alumbrar and to protect the island. And it sort of uses them up in a bad way. So things are really not good for the Obeah under the Alumbrar. And the tensions that we start with in the beginning of the book are that the woman who, the Doyen, who is the leader of the Alumbrar, has really started to take on a lot of practices that go against everything their order stands for. So human sacrifice, for example, as a legitimate way to protect their order and their rule of the island. So right in the beginning of the book, we're introduced to a rebel group. The woman on the cover here, oh my gosh, whose name I'm totally blanking on, Jasmine. This is Jasmine and Ira. Jasmine is the daughter of the doyen. She is supposed to inherit being essentially the queen of the island, but she is sort of disgusted by her mother's turn to these practices that her people, her order, should consider abhorrent. So she's working with a resistance group. And then we have Ira, who is the daughter of the Obeah family, who was previously the ruling Obeah family. And she had managed to escape being killed in the resistance and has been living incognito in a prison ever since. So she was about 8 or so when the insurrection happened. So we see these two women, and they're both going through some things. So Jasmine is really, at the beginning of the book, really unsure of herself, really questioning whether she can ever sort of take over as the leader. Ira has always hated that she was born to be, actually they called it an empress in the Obeah order. So she's always hated that she was born to be an empress because she just wants to be a warrior. And so she had spent much of her childhood actually avoiding her official government duties and just training to be a warrior. And so, of course, these two women come together over the course of the story. And the question is are there ways that they can cooperate to sort of save their island from itself almost, and get rid of Jasmine's mother, who has turned to some really nasty ways and has, implemented all these really strict measures of controlling the Obeah. So that's sort of the setup of the story. So there's a lot to love here. Just that whole setup is really, really cool. I really like the magic system. The magic is super limited in this story. So magic is inherited. It only goes to the firstborn child, and it only goes in its full measure to the firstborn child when the parent who's holding it dies. And so that sort of set up some of the politics involved in the human sacrifice in this book, because it's firstborn kids who are being killed as deliberate religious human sacrifices to protect their nation. And it's interesting because it's looked on as this absolutely abhorrent thing, but the kids who are often chosen are the firstborns of people who are on the ruling council. And so there's sort of this tension of like, how much of this is the doyen potentially punishing these people and keeping them in line? Or are they selfish enough and wanting to keep power enough that they are sacrificing their own kids? So there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's wild. But I really like that magic is inherited. It also comes with a great cost to wield, because a lot of folks use gold as a conduit, but then the gold gets burned up over time as you use it to use your magic. Then there's some other ways to use magic. You can use it through the ancestors, but that comes with its own dangers because the ancestors can be very fickle. And then there's something about all the main families, and there's another family that's part of this magic system that rules a different island, and it's like the line of each of those families was imbued with an extra sort of level of magic that comes from their religious figure, I think, which is called the seven-faced Mutta. And so that's one of the things in the book, is that Ira, the Obeah witch who doesn't want to be an empress, she keeps sort of losing her control. Once she gets her magic, she sort of loses control of it occasionally, and that huge powerful wave sort of comes through, and everybody's like, oh, you're not who you say you are. So there's just interesting things about the magic. But all of that said, this book, there's so much promise, and it didn't really deliver. It was still good. I think I am going to read the sequel when it comes out, but it's very much like a in the middle of the road book for me. Part of that was the writing. So some of the writing I found really beautiful, but it's very, it's written in sort of a choppy style, like a lot of YA can be. But yeah, so here's one thing I liked. Nana would say that unlike storms, trouble doesn't give signs like rain, so we must always be ready for it. Another just little one sentence thing that I liked was, I am not a liar by nature, but tonight I must sell the sky to magi who know it's free. So there's good writing. There's a lot of imagery. A lot of it is really gorgeous, but just that choppiness. And that's what turns me off of YA a lot of the time, is it just feels choppy. And so I never got wrapped up into this book. It was easy to put down, and then it wasn't like an automatic grab to pick it back up. And I think that was the writing style. But yeah, and then there was just, there was a lot happening, but simultaneously the book was too long. Because there were big periods of the book where the two main characters, Ira and Jasmine, were in a way just sort of moping around in their own way. Like Jasmine in particular is really ineffective for much of the book. And we didn't learn anything new about their characters during those periods. Because I think sort of quiet moments or moments of indecision can be used to further explore a character, give us new information, show character development, etc. And that didn't really happen in these quiet moments. It just felt like it was more of the same thing. And then with regards to character development, one of the characters, Jasmine, and I actually sort of like this. I'm not going to give any spoilers. This is a spoiler-free review. But the way she developed was not the way I was expecting her to develop. And I like that happened. Like, I think it was really cool. But it wasn't set up well. It sort of came totally out of the blue. It was almost like an overnight switch because there was just so much we were seeing off the page. And so I guess that's sort of my main beef, is that we would get these like so many chapters where the characters just weren't really doing anything, but we also weren't learning anything about them. And then there was a ton of stuff happening off the page. And so especially with the character development pieces, it's like, you got to show us that that's happening. And you took the space to do it in a 500-page book, right? Like, the space was available and it just wasn't used right. So all of that sort of bothered me, and made it, again, a good book, and one I'm glad that I read, but it wasn't absorbing, I guess. So I hope I'm making sense. Like I said, this was, so a middle of the road book for me. I think I will read the sequel because I think the world is really cool. I do want to find out what happens, which is often my downfall in fantasy. I'm like, I need to know what happens. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Witches Steeped in Gold by Ciannon Smart. If you've read it, I would love to hear what you think. I still think folks should read this. I think you should plan to read it. If you're in the mood for a middle of the road YA fantasy, YA/adult fantasy. Okay. I'm going to stop talking at this point, but it's good to be back. I hope to make some more videos, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.